I grew up in a small, middle-class town. Nothing extravagant. My parents worked hard. My dad was a mechanic and my mom worked as a nurse. We weren't rich by any stretch, but we got by. I remember sitting around the dinner table, hearing stories about how my dad built his mechanic shop from the ground up. He'd worked multiple jobs and saved every penny to buy the space. And over the years, he had turned it into a respected shop in the town. It wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about building trust, about earning respect. I always admired that. But here's the thing. My childhood was full of stories about hard work, sacrifice, and building something meaningful. But I never felt like I had a clear path of my own. I wasn't one of those kids who always knew they wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an entrepreneur. I just floated through high school, barely passing my classes, and not really thinking about the future. In fact, I didn't even consider college a real option. It wasn't that I couldn't have gone. It was that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. So, instead of applying to universities, I decided to take a year off, just to figure things out. That year ended up being one of the most transformative periods of my life. I started working at a local coffee shop, initially just to make some money, but quickly found myself getting intrigued by the business side of things. The owner was this eccentric guy who had a passion for coffee and customer service. He taught me how to make the perfect cappuccino, sure, but he also gave me a crash course in running a business. I learned about inventory, customer relationships, and how to keep a small business afloat. It was my first real introduction to the idea of entrepreneurship. The turning point came one day when the owner sat me down and told me that he was thinking about expanding. He had a great business model, but lacked the capital to grow. I remember asking him why he didn't just apply for a loan or find investors. His response was simple, yet it stuck with me. Investors don't believe in small businesses. They want big returns, and they're not interested in what it takes to get there. That statement hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that entrepreneurship was not just about a good idea. It was about resilience, about figuring out how to make it work on your own. I started thinking more seriously about starting my own business, but the more I researched, the more I realized how intimidating the whole process seemed. Everyone I talked to, from my parents to the few mentors I had, told me the same thing. It's going to be tough, but if you're dedicated, it could work. After months of saving and planning, I came up with the idea for my first business, a mobile car detailing service. It seemed perfect. I didn't need a shop or expensive equipment to start, and I could operate out of my van. I had seen a demand for it in my town, and I was confident that if I delivered excellent service, I could make a good living. I poured all my savings into getting the necessary equipment, designed flyers, and made my website. It was a leap of faith, but at that point, I had nothing to lose. I started small, working evenings and weekends, offering services to local car owners. At first, it was slow. I'd only get a few calls here and there, and I found myself working long hours for not a lot of money. But I didn't let that stop me. I made sure every customer left 100% satisfied, hoping that word of mouth would spread. And slowly it did. People started recommending me to their friends, and business began to pick up. However, just as things started looking up, I ran into a major roadblock. I had underpriced my services, and my expenses were much higher than I had anticipated. I hadn't accounted for things like gas, maintenance on my van, and the time it took to travel between clients. For the first few months, I was barely breaking even. I was stressed out and questioning whether I had made a huge mistake. But this is where the entrepreneurial mindset kicked in. Instead of throwing in the towel, I took a step back and reevaluated my strategy. I adjusted my pricing, became more efficient with my time, and started offering additional services like engine cleaning and waxing, which allowed me to increase my revenue. I also started reaching out to larger clients, like car dealerships and rental agencies, offering bulk packages. Slowly but surely, the business turned a corner. But even as I grew my mobile detailing business, I knew that I wanted more. I didn't just want to be another local business owner. I wanted to scale. I started thinking about ways to expand beyond the small town I had started in. I began researching franchising, digital marketing, and ways to automate certain aspects of the business. I invested in a CRM system to better manage customer relationships, hired a few employees, and focused more on the marketing side of things. Soon enough, I had a team of 4 people working for me, and we were servicing a larger area. The real game changer came when I partnered with a national car rental company. They liked the idea of offering their customers high-quality mobile detailing services, so they signed a contract with us. That partnership led to more corporate clients, and I found myself traveling across the state, speaking with potential partners and looking for new opportunities to grow. A year later, my small mobile detailing business had turned into a thriving company with over a dozen employees and multiple service vans. We were servicing clients all across the region, and my focus had shifted to growing and scaling the business. But despite the success, I was always reminded of where I had started. I'd come from a small, middle-class family with no formal business education. All I had was grit, a willingness to learn, and an unwavering belief that success comes through hard work and persistence. Looking back, I never could have imagined how far I'd come. From working in a coffee shop with no idea of what I wanted to do with my life, to running a successful business with multiple employees, it felt like a dream. But what I learned throughout the entire process is that entrepreneurship isn't about having the perfect idea. It's about taking risks, learning from mistakes, and being relentless in the pursuit of growth. Today, I'm not just the owner of a successful business. I'm also a mentor to others who are looking to start their own ventures. And while it's been an incredibly rewarding journey, I know the real work is never done. The challenges never stop coming. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that it's all part of the ride. The key is to keep going, no matter how tough it gets. In the end, entrepreneurship isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. And as long as I'm still moving forward, I know I'm on the right path. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. When I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just a 25-year-old with a dream and a laptop, sitting in my parents' basement. The idea came to me while I was still working my 9-to-5 job at a tech startup in Silicon Valley. The job was good, but I was always restless. I knew I wanted more. I wanted to build something of my own, to leave a mark, and to truly experience the freedom of being my own boss. I had been reading a lot about successful entrepreneurs, the ones who made it big by starting small. The stories of people who went from broke to multimillionaires seemed like something out of a dream, but I couldn't shake the thought that if they could do it, why couldn't I? The idea that stuck with me was simple. People wanted convenience, and they wanted to save time. At the time, food delivery was starting to take off in major cities, but it was far from perfect. Orders were often wrong, delivery times were inconsistent, and customer service was hit or miss. I figured I could create a platform that would solve these issues, something more reliable, more user-friendly, and most importantly, something that would connect people with local businesses in a more personalized way. So, I started sketching out ideas in my notebook. I'd spent a few years working with tech startups, so I had a decent understanding of how to build a platform, but I didn't know the first thing about running a business. The first step, I realized, was figuring out how to actually get the product off the ground. The tech side was the easy part. It was everything else that would prove to be a challenge. I decided to keep my full-time job for a while, thinking that I could build my business on the side. In hindsight, this was probably my biggest mistake. Balancing a full-time job with the demands of building a business was overwhelming. I'd spend 8 hours at work, then come home and work another 6 to 8 hours on my side project. This left me with very little time for friends, family, or even sleep. After months of late nights, I had a basic prototype. It was rough, but it worked. I started talking to a few local restaurants, pitching my idea. At first, they weren't interested. They were happy with their existing methods and didn't think an outsider could bring anything new to the table. But I kept at it. I went door to door. I cold called owners. I offered free trials. Eventually, I signed up my first 2 clients, both small, independent restaurants. That was my first taste of success. It was a small win, but it was a win nonetheless. The next few months were a whirlwind. I built the app, refined the platform, and began marketing to other restaurants. I was still working full-time, but I had started to generate some revenue. I felt like I was on the right path, even though I wasn't sure exactly where it was leading me. But then, just as I started to feel like things were coming together, disaster struck. One morning, I woke up to an email from my biggest client. They were pulling out. They had found a competitor who offered a lower fee. I was devastated. This was the client that had kept me afloat. Losing them felt like the end of the road. I wanted to quit. I was exhausted, burnt out, and questioning whether I was cut out for this. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, looked at my bank account, and realized that I had to keep going. There was no going back now. I doubled down. I refined my pitch, focused on providing even more value, and began networking like crazy. Slowly but surely, I started to get new clients. Each win was a small victory, and over time, my confidence grew. But just when I thought things were going well, I ran into another huge obstacle, a cash flow problem. I didn't have enough capital to scale quickly. I was scraping by, paying bills and making payroll with whatever revenue I was bringing in, but it wasn't enough to invest in advertising, hire new employees, or really grow the business. I knew I needed outside funding, but I had no idea where to get it. I tried to reach out to investors, but no one seemed interested. My business wasn't big enough, and I didn't have a proven track record. I didn't give up. I started looking for alternative funding options, including crowdfunding. After a lot of effort, I was able to raise enough money from people who believed in my vision. With the new funds, I was able to improve the app, hire more people, and start expanding into new markets. Things were starting to pick up, but the challenges didn't stop. Scaling the business wasn't easy. I had to constantly adapt to new challenges, keeping up with customer demands, managing a growing team, dealing with the technical side of things. There were days when I thought I was in over my head. But every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself that failure wasn't an option. I was building something important, and no matter how tough it got, I couldn't give up. Fast forward 3 years. The business is profitable, and I've expanded into multiple cities. I've hired a fantastic team, and we've established ourselves as a leader in the industry. Looking back, I realized that the journey wasn't just about building a successful company. It was about learning, growing, and overcoming obstacles. There were many moments when I questioned whether it was worth it. When I was broke, tired, and felt like everything was falling apart, it was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I kept pushing forward. I've learned more than I could have ever imagined, not just about business, but about myself. And now, after everything I've been through, I can confidently say that the most important lesson I've learned is that perseverance is everything. You can have all the talent in the world, but without the ability to keep going when things get tough, you'll never make it. Building a business is hard, but it's worth it. In the end, I'm not the richest entrepreneur out there, but I've built something that I'm proud of. I've created a company that provides jobs, helps local businesses thrive, and makes people's lives a little bit easier. That's more than I could have ever hoped for when I first started out in my parents' basement with just a dream and a laptop. Would I do it again? Absolutely. The road was long and difficult, but every struggle was worth it. The key to success is simple. Keep going, no matter how hard it gets. And when you think you can't go any further, take a deep breath and keep pushing forward. You never know where it might take you. I was 23 when I decided to leave my corporate job and start my own business. I had been working as an entry-level marketing assistant at a mid-sized firm for a couple of years. The hours were long, the work was monotonous, and the pay? Let's just say, I was barely making enough to cover rent and basic expenses. I remember coming home from work one evening, exhausted and frustrated, and looking at my bank account. It was then I realized something had to change. I didn't want to live my life just scraping by, working for someone else's dream while my own went unnoticed. I had always been interested in fitness, ever since I was a teenager. I worked out regularly, read books on nutrition, and followed fitness trends. But I never thought of it as a potential career. It was just something I did for fun. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how passionate I was about health and fitness, and how much I could potentially help others by sharing my knowledge. After a few weeks of sleepless nights and research, I had a crazy idea. What if I could create a fitness coaching business? But I wasn't talking about a regular gym or personal trainer gig. No, I was thinking bigger, an online coaching service. I envisioned a platform where people could receive customized workout plans, diet advice, and motivation, all without leaving the comfort of their homes. In my mind, this was the future of fitness. I could reach more people and help them in a way that traditional personal training couldn't. I started small. I knew I needed some credibility, so I spent the next 6 months getting certified as a personal trainer and nutritionist. I was working full-time at the marketing job during the day and studying at night. It was grueling, but every moment felt worth it. I was determined to make it work. I started researching everything I could about online coaching, how to market, what kind of content would attract clients, what platforms to use. I learned about social media algorithms, content creation, and online marketing. By the time I got my certifications, I was ready to launch my business. But I quickly realized that starting a business wasn't as simple as just opening a website. I needed a solid plan. The first obstacle was figuring out how to generate clients. I had zero connections in the fitness world, and I wasn't sure where to begin. I began by creating an Instagram account where I posted my fitness journey, tips, and advice. I started small, sharing workout routines and health tips that I thought could help people. At first, it felt like no one was paying attention. My posts barely got any likes, and I struggled to gain followers. But I didn't give up. I kept posting, learning, and experimenting with different strategies to engage my audience. I reached out to other fitness influencers for collaboration and tried to learn from those who were successful. Slowly but surely, my follower count started to grow. One night, I received a direct message from a woman named Emily. She said she had been following me for a while and loved my content. She was interested in getting a personalized workout plan, and after some back and forth, I convinced her to sign up for my services. She was my first paying client. Getting my first client was exhilarating. It felt like everything I had worked for was finally coming together. I remember spending hours crafting the perfect workout plan for Emily, making sure it was tailored to her specific goals. Once I sent it to her, she immediately started working on it and began seeing results. Over time, I gained more clients, and with each one, my confidence grew. I knew this was the right path for me. However, the journey wasn't without its challenges. As my client base grew, so did the pressure. Managing a growing business was no small feat. There were times when I felt overwhelmed, unsure if I could keep up with the demands of both my full-time job and my side business. There were late nights, endless to-do lists, and moments of self-doubt. I had to juggle responding to clients, creating new content, maintaining my website, and doing all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into running a business. There were times I wanted to give up, but I reminded myself of why I started in the first place, to create something that would allow me to live on my terms and help others along the way. It wasn't until a year later that I was able to quit my corporate job. The online coaching business had grown enough that I could finally rely on it as my main source of income. It was a huge leap of faith. Walking out of that office for the last time, I felt a mix of emotions, excitement, fear, pride, but most of all, I felt free. I knew this was what I was meant to do. One of the biggest lessons I learned in those early years was the importance of adaptation. The online world moves fast, and what worked yesterday might not work today. I had to constantly innovate and find new ways to stay relevant. Social media trends changed, platforms evolved, and what my clients wanted also shifted. I made it a priority to listen to my audience and be responsive to their needs. In the end, it was this adaptability that helped me stay ahead of the competition. Another key lesson was the importance of building relationships with clients. It wasn't enough to just give them a workout plan and hope for the best. I needed to be there for them, offer guidance, motivation, and support every step of the way. I made it a point to personalize my interactions and connect with clients on a deeper level. Over time, I realized that my clients weren't just paying for fitness advice, they were paying for accountability and emotional support. Fitness, after all, is just as much a mental journey as it is a physical one. As my business continued to grow, I added more services, including group coaching, meal plans, and even digital fitness products. I also expanded my team, hiring other certified trainers to help with the workload. The more successful my business became, the more I realized that I wasn't just building a fitness coaching company, I was building a brand, a community, and a movement. Fast forward to today, and I've built a six-figure business. I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of clients, many of whom have become lifelong friends. I've been featured in magazines, spoken at events, and even had the chance to collaborate with some of the biggest names in fitness. But the best part? I get to wake up every day and do something I love. I'm no longer just surviving, I'm thriving. Looking back, it's crazy to think how far I've come. The journey hasn't been easy, but every challenge and setback has been worth it. I know I wouldn't be where I am today without the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the constant hustle. My advice to anyone thinking about starting their own business is simple. If you're passionate about something and willing to put in the work, don't let fear hold you back. You never know what's possible until you try. It's been a wild ride, but I wouldn't change a thing. I'm living proof that with enough determination, you can turn your dreams into reality. I had always been the kind of person who knew I was meant for something bigger, something different. Growing up in a small town, I watched my parents work tirelessly just to keep the lights on. They were good people, kind people, but their financial struggles were a constant reminder that hard work didn't always equate to success. My dad, a mechanic, and my mom, a nurse, were both used to the grind. They worked long hours, barely taking a break, but no matter how hard they worked, the bills never seemed to get any smaller. It was clear to me from a young age that I had to find a different way. I wasn't particularly great at school, but I had an instinct for business. While the other kids were into sports or gaming, I was thinking about ways to make money. I'd sell lemonade in the summer, offer to mow lawns in the neighborhood, and even found ways to buy and sell things online in high school. By the time I turned 18, I had saved up about $5,000. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I had an idea. I was going to start an online store. This was back in 2012, and e-commerce was starting to gain real momentum. I had no formal training in business, no degree in marketing, and absolutely no clue what I was doing, but I had a gut feeling that this was the right move. I spent hours every night reading about how to set up a website, how to market products, and what kind of products were trending. I eventually launched my store selling phone accessories. I thought I had struck gold, but reality quickly hit me in the face. At first, I barely made a sale. I had invested all my money into inventory, advertising, and setting up a website that looked far more professional than I was capable of making. I remember the feeling of checking my sales every morning, only to see that the numbers hadn't budged. It was demoralizing, to say the least. I didn't have any contacts, no network, and no real understanding of what I was doing. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't afford to fail. The pressure to make this work was intense, but I kept going. It took a few months before I got my first sale. I'll never forget the feeling when that first order came through. I could hardly believe it. It wasn't much, just a $20 phone case. But to me, it felt like I had unlocked the door to a world of opportunity. I figured if I could make one sale, I could make more. It was like a light bulb went off, and I dove in headfirst, refining my website, investing in better products, and learning more about digital marketing. The more I learned, the more I understood the business, and the more success followed. Fast forward a year, and my store was pulling in a few $1,000s a month in revenue. I still wasn't living the dream, but I was making progress. That's when I realized the next big challenge was scaling. I didn't want to stay stuck making just a few thousand. I wanted to go big. I knew that I had to diversify my product range, expand my marketing strategies, and maybe even bring on a team. But money was tight, and I couldn't afford to hire anyone. I turned to the one resource I had plenty of: time. I started working 16 to 18-hour days, learning everything I could about marketing, SEO, branding, and customer service. My mind was constantly buzzing with ideas. I also started experimenting with Facebook ads, something I had no idea how to do but was willing to learn. I remember spending hours creating the perfect ad, watching videos, reading articles, and tweaking the copy. Finally, after weeks of trial and error, my Facebook ads started to bring in results. Slowly but surely, my sales began to rise. However, the growth didn't come without its challenges. In my third year of business, I faced one of the most difficult periods of my life. A huge order from a supplier was delayed, and customers were getting upset. I had to navigate chargebacks, customer complaints, and even had to issue some refunds. On top of that, I was dealing with my own financial struggles. I had invested everything I had into the business, and there were times when I thought I might lose it all. But I kept pushing forward. I learned to be resourceful, cutting costs where I could, finding ways to resolve issues quickly, and building relationships with customers who had supported me through the rough patches. In the fourth year, things finally began to click. I had a solid customer base, a strong marketing strategy, and a product line that was gaining traction. My revenue doubled, and I could finally breathe a little easier. But there was still something missing. I knew I had to differentiate myself from the countless other e-commerce stores out there. That's when I came up with the idea of creating a brand around my store, something that stood for more than just products. I started telling stories about my journey, about the struggles and triumphs, and about the vision I had for the business. People loved it. It was real, it was authentic, and it resonated with my audience. As the brand grew, so did the opportunities. I expanded into new product lines, hired a small team to help with operations, and even began working with influencers to promote my products. Things were going well, but I never lost sight of what had gotten me here in the first place. Hard work, learning from mistakes, and never giving up. Every time I hit a new milestone, I was already thinking about the next one. By year 5, my business was pulling in 6 figures annually. I had turned my small e-commerce store into a legitimate company, and I was living a life that was light years beyond anything I had imagined back when I was in that tiny apartment, working late nights. The challenges never stopped coming, but I had learned how to face them head-on, knowing that each obstacle was an opportunity to learn and grow. Looking back, I can see how every failure, every setback, and every challenge was a crucial part of my success. If I had given up at any point, I wouldn't be where I am today. The most important lesson I've learned is that success doesn't come overnight. It's about perseverance, resilience, and the willingness to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard things get. I may have started with nothing but a few $1,000 and a dream, but today, I run a successful business that employs dozens of people and continues to grow year after year. It's been a long and difficult journey, but if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that success isn't just about making money. It's about building something that lasts, something that reflects who you are and what you stand for. And in the end, that's what makes the struggle worth it. I never imagined that a small idea in the back of my mind could lead to what it has today. If someone had told me back in 2012 that I'd be running a multi-million-dollar business by 2025, I would have laughed and dismissed them as crazy. But here I am, running a tech startup that revolutionized a niche in the digital space, and I still feel like I'm just getting started. It all began back in college when I was pursuing a degree in computer science. At the time, I was a full-time student juggling a part-time job as a barista. I was living in a tiny, rented apartment, struggling to make ends meet. I had zero savings, and my student loans were piling up. Like many of my peers, I had the dream of making something of myself, but it was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. One day, I found myself at work during a particularly slow shift, cleaning counters and restocking napkins, when a thought hit me. It wasn't even a groundbreaking idea, just a small observation. I realized that many small businesses around me were struggling to get their brands online. Whether it was setting up a simple website, creating social media profiles, or just understanding how to market themselves digitally, these businesses were falling behind. I had always been interested in digital marketing, especially the technical side of things. As I sipped my coffee, I thought, what if I could build a platform that helps small businesses navigate the digital world? At that moment, my business idea was born, but it was far from clear what it would become. I spent the next few months researching, sketching out plans, and developing a simple prototype during my spare time. My initial idea was to create an all-in-one platform that helped small businesses easily set up a website, manage their social media, and run simple ad campaigns without needing any prior expertise. I called it BizLift because I wanted to help small businesses get off the ground and lift their digital presence. To say the first few months were tough would be an understatement. I was still working my part-time job and attending school full-time. I had no funding, no investors, and no real team. It was just me, a laptop, and a ton of coffee. But I didn't care. I was driven by the belief that if I could just get this thing off the ground, it could change everything for me. I launched the first version of BizLift in late 2013. It was a simple landing page with a few features, and I could barely afford the hosting costs. But, to my surprise, people started signing up. It wasn't a huge number, just a handful of small businesses in my local area, but it was enough to keep me going. I spent the next few months iterating on the platform. I learned quickly that I needed to focus on what was working and cut out what wasn't. Some features that I thought would be essential turned out to be unnecessary, while others I hadn't thought of became crucial. I also realized that marketing was just as important as the product itself, so I started writing blog posts, creating how-to guides, and leveraging social media to get the word out. By 2015, BizLift had gained some traction. I was able to quit my barista job, and I moved into a small office space with 2 other employees I hired through Craigslist. We had a small team, a bigger budget, and a growing customer base, but we were still a long way from being a profitable business. I struggled with the same things any entrepreneur does at that stage, keeping up with the demand, managing cash flow, and trying not to burn out. The breakthrough came in 2016 when I realized that instead of trying to do everything myself, I needed to delegate. I hired a few more key people, each with specific skills: a marketing expert to run campaigns, a developer to scale the platform, and an account manager to handle customer relations. This move was pivotal. Suddenly, we had the bandwidth to grow, and the ideas started flowing faster than ever. That same year, we launched a new feature that allowed customers to build their own websites from scratch using templates. It was an instant success. Small businesses loved the ease of use and customization, and they began recommending BizLift to their peers. Word of mouth, combined with strategic partnerships with local chambers of commerce, propelled us into a new level of growth. By 2017, BizLift was growing exponentially. We secured our first round of funding from a group of angel investors, which allowed us to expand our team, enhance the product, and market more aggressively. We now had over 100 employees and were operating in multiple countries. Despite the growth, I remained focused on the core mission, making digital marketing accessible to small businesses. In 2018, we faced our first major crisis. A competitor emerged with a similar platform that was better funded and had some features that we didn't offer. For a brief moment, I thought we might not survive. We were small, and they were backed by millions of dollars in venture capital. But instead of giving up, we doubled down on our strengths. We listened to our customers, made quick improvements, and focused on offering exceptional customer service. Our platform wasn't the most flashy, but it was reliable, affordable, and user-friendly. That was enough to keep us ahead of the competition. By 2020, BizLift had become one of the leading platforms in the small business digital marketing space. We had over 500,000 active users and were generating millions in revenue. I finally allowed myself to take a step back and reflect on how far we had come. It wasn't just about the money or the growth. It was about the impact we had on thousands of small businesses, helping them succeed in an increasingly digital world. In 2021, we took things to the next level. We expanded our product offerings, including e-commerce solutions, email marketing tools, and even a mobile app to help business owners manage everything on the go. We also began offering free educational resources to help business owners better understand the digital marketing landscape. We became more than just a platform. We were a true partner in the success of our customers. Today, as I sit at the helm of a thriving company, I still remember those early days, working late nights at my laptop in a small, cluttered apartment. The road has been anything but smooth, and I've faced countless challenges along the way. But through it all, I've learned that perseverance, adaptability, and a relentless belief in the vision are the keys to success. It's been an incredible journey, but I'm far from done. BizLift is continuing to grow, and I'm constantly thinking of ways to improve and evolve. The best part? I get to wake up every day knowing that I'm helping small business owners achieve their dreams, just as I once dreamed of achieving mine. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. In fact, I thought I was the kind of person who would always be content working a 9-to-5 job. But here I am, running a successful business, and it feels like a lifetime ago when I started out with nothing but an idea and a pile of debt. It all started about 5 years ago. I was working a corporate job that I hated. Every day felt like a repeat of the last. Wake up, go to work, come home exhausted, rinse and repeat. I felt stuck. But what really frustrated me was the sense that I was capable of more. I had dreams and ideas that I felt were just sitting inside me, gathering dust. I always thought about doing something creative, something that could make me happy, but I just couldn't find the courage to take the leap. That is, until I had an idea. It came to me one evening after a particularly rough day at work. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through Instagram, when I came across a post from a small business owner selling unique, handmade candles. They were beautiful, and I thought to myself, I could make something like that. I wasn't exactly sure what I could make, but I knew I had to try something. It was like a spark had been lit. The next day, I went to a local craft store and bought the materials to make my first set of handmade candles. I didn't know the first thing about candle making, but I watched a couple of YouTube videos, read some articles, and dove in headfirst. The first few attempts were horrible, burnt wicks, uneven wax, and the scent was all wrong. But I kept at it. I was determined. Each batch was an improvement, even if only slightly. After a couple of weeks of trial and error, I finally had a set of candles that looked decent. I posted a picture of them on Instagram, just for fun, with a caption saying, "Handmade candles. DM for inquiries." I didn't expect anything to come of it, but to my surprise, people started messaging me. At first, it was just a couple of friends asking if they could buy them. Then, it was strangers. Before I knew it, I was selling out every batch. I realized there was a demand for what I was doing, and I could make a real business out of it. The problem, of course, was that I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't a business person. I was just a corporate drone with a passion for creating things. So, I did what anyone in my position would do. I Googled everything. I spent countless hours reading about marketing, branding, sales, and customer service. I joined Facebook groups and Reddit forums full of people who had done what I was trying to do. Slowly, I started to understand the ins and outs of running a small business. I learned about product pricing, how to set up an online store, how to deal with shipping, and the importance of customer feedback. Every day felt like a crash course in entrepreneurship. But while I was learning the technical side of things, I was also building a brand. I didn't want to just sell candles. I wanted to create an experience. I wanted my customers to feel like they were buying something special, not just a product. So, I started branding my candles with unique names, designing custom packaging, and sharing my story on social media. I let people know that I wasn't just a business owner. I was someone who genuinely cared about the quality of the products and the experience I was providing. The first few months were a whirlwind. I was balancing my day job with running my side hustle, and it was exhausting. I would wake up early to make candles before work, then spend my lunch breaks answering emails and handling orders. After work, I'd package up candles and ship them out. Some nights, I didn't sleep at all. It was all-consuming, but I loved it. I was building something from scratch, and I couldn't stop. Then came the turning point. One night, I got an email from a boutique in my city. They wanted to carry my candles in their store. I was floored. I hadn't even considered wholesale, but here was an opportunity. After a few rounds of negotiations, I secured a deal to have my candles sold in the store. That was the moment when I realized that my side hustle could be more than just a hobby. It could actually be a business. As the months went by, I continued to grow. I scaled my candle-making process, hired a few part-time workers, and started collaborating with other small businesses. I also invested in advertising and grew my social media following. I still remember the first time I made over $1,000 in a single day. I couldn't believe it. That was the moment I knew I could make this work full-time. But, as any entrepreneur knows, the journey isn't all smooth sailing. I ran into plenty of challenges along the way. There were cash flow issues, shipping delays, and unexpected production problems. I made mistakes, some of them costly. There were moments when I wondered if it was all worth it. But every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. I wanted to build something that mattered. Eventually, I reached a point where I was able to quit my corporate job and focus on my business full-time. That was one of the scariest decisions I ever made. Leaving behind the security of a steady paycheck for the uncertainty of entrepreneurship felt like jumping off a cliff. But it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. Looking back, I still can't believe how far I've come. My candle business has grown into something I'm incredibly proud of. We now ship internationally, and I've expanded into other products like custom gift sets and home fragrances. I've built a team of amazing people, and I've even started mentoring other aspiring entrepreneurs. I'm not saying it's easy. Running a business is hard work, and there are days when I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. But every time I think about how far I've come, from that exhausted corporate employee to a full-time entrepreneur, I know I made the right choice. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone thinking about starting a business, it would be this: just start. It doesn't matter if you don't know everything or if you think you're not ready. You'll learn along the way, and every small step you take will get you closer to your goal. The hardest part is taking that first leap, but once you do, there's no turning back. Don't wait for the perfect moment, create it. And if you're wondering whether I still make candles, yes, I do. In fact, I make every batch personally to ensure the quality is up to the standards that my customers expect. It's still my passion, and it's still the heart of my business. 5 years ago, I never would have imagined that I'd be where I am today. But I took a chance on myself, and that made all the difference. I always thought that success was a destination. Growing up, I would listen to people talk about their dreams, the businesses they started, the risks they took. I thought if I just followed the steps, stayed persistent, and worked hard, success would eventually find me. I had no idea that what I was seeking wasn't just success, but the constant battle of failures and learning. My name's Jason, and this is my story. When I was 25, I was working at a standard 9-to-5 job in a corporate office, doing the same thing every day, watching the clock tick slowly toward 5 p.m. I had always dreamed of starting my own business, But the thought of leaving my comfort zone terrified me. I watched people around me work their whole lives for a paycheck, but deep down, I knew I wasn't meant to sit in a cubicle. I wanted more. I just didn't know how to get it. One day, during a lunch break, I was scrolling through social media, and I saw an ad for an online course that promised to teach you how to start a business from scratch. I had seen these kinds of ads before but brushed them off as scams. But this time, something clicked. It wasn't the course itself that intrigued me, but the idea that maybe this was the spark I needed to ignite something I had been putting off for years. After some internal debate and a couple of sleepless nights, I took the plunge and bought the course. It was expensive. Too expensive, honestly, but I was willing to do whatever it took. I figured if it didn't work out, at least I would have learned something. The first few lessons were overwhelming. There were so many things I had to understand: marketing, branding, product development, and finances. I had no clue about any of it. My entire world had revolved around spreadsheets and PowerPoints, not entrepreneurship. But as I got deeper into the material, something interesting happened. I found myself excited. I had never felt this kind of passion before. I was diving into concepts I'd never even heard of, and it felt like I was unlocking new doors to my future. I began to realize that the real world of business wasn't about being born into wealth or having a network of powerful people. It was about grit, learning, and constantly pushing forward despite the hurdles. I spent nights after work in front of my laptop, absorbing everything I could. I took notes, jotted down ideas, and slowly started applying what I was learning. I still had a full-time job, but in my heart, I was already building my business. There were so many sleepless nights, so many "what am I doing" moments, but each step I took made me more determined to keep going. I had no idea what niche I wanted to target. The course taught me that choosing a product or service that I was passionate about was key. But how could I find my passion when I felt so out of touch with what I truly wanted? I knew I loved tech, gadgets, apps, the way new technologies were changing our lives. I had always been that guy who spent hours reading about the latest advancements, so maybe this was it. I decided to create a small tech gadget store online, selling products I personally loved. It wasn't a revolutionary idea, but I figured that if I could offer quality items with excellent customer service, I'd be ahead of the game. The initial setup was a nightmare. The website didn't work the way I wanted it to. The suppliers I found were unreliable. And, of course, there was no traffic. For the first few months, it felt like I was shouting into the void. I'd gotten so excited about starting that I forgot one major thing: marketing. I threw together some basic social media campaigns, hoping to get some attention. My ads weren't converting, and my products sat there gathering dust. It was heartbreaking. I began to question everything. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe my dream of being my own boss was just that, a dream. But then I had a conversation with a fellow entrepreneur I had met in an online forum. He told me that every business goes through a 0 point, a period where things seem impossible. The key was to push through. With renewed determination, I focused on my marketing efforts. I researched SEO, improved my website, and tried to get some influencer collaborations. Slowly but surely, I started seeing results. One by one, customers began to trickle in. I'd check my email and see orders coming through, and it felt like a validation that maybe, just maybe, I was on the right track. But those small wins weren't enough. I knew that success wasn't going to come without consistent effort. Then came the moment that changed everything. One day, an influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram posted about one of my products. It was completely unexpected. I hadn't even reached out to her, but she loved my product so much that she made a post tagging my store. The next morning, my website crashed. Orders were pouring in, and I couldn't keep up. It felt like the breakthrough I had been waiting for. But it also felt overwhelming. I had no systems in place to handle this kind of growth. I had to scramble to get new inventory, update my website, and communicate with customers. The pressure was intense, but I refused to let this opportunity slip away. By the end of that week, my sales had quadrupled. I couldn't believe it. The adrenaline kept me going, but I was also starting to understand the true nature of entrepreneurship. Success wasn't just about hard work. It was about timing, connections, and sometimes luck. But that luck only happens when you're putting in the work. Over the next year, I expanded my product line, built a better website, and hired my first employee. I started seeing regular revenue and even had the opportunity to quit my day job. I was no longer the person stuck in a cubicle. I had become the person who took risks, learned from failure, and kept going. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about the financial success. It wasn't even about the satisfaction of seeing my name attached to a growing business. The real lesson was about the journey. The failures, the late nights, the doubts, they were all part of what made the success worth it. I had arrived at a place I once thought was just a dream, but I now understood that success wasn't a destination. It was a series of small steps, every single day, towards something greater. I'm still learning, still growing, and still making mistakes. But now, when I look at my business and the people I've helped along the way, I know it was all worth it. This is only the beginning. I never expected to be where I am now. I started from nothing, literally. Just a guy with a computer, a few skills, and a burning desire to escape the 9-to-5 grind. My story isn't glamorous, but it's a testament to persistence, learning from mistakes, and a little bit of luck. I guess, like many entrepreneurs, I've had my share of struggles, but looking back, it all feels like part of the journey. It all started in 2016. I was working as a junior marketing assistant at a mid-sized company in the city. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to pay the bills. However, the daily routine drained me. I hated the long commute, the mind-numbing meetings, and the office politics. I remember sitting in one of those awful weekly meetings, listening to my boss drone on about irrelevant metrics, when I had a realization I could do this on my own. The idea seemed both liberating and terrifying. What if I failed? What if I couldn't make enough money to support myself? But what if I succeeded? What if I could break free from this routine and build something on my own? That night, I stayed up late doing research on side hustles, online businesses, and digital marketing. I read stories about people who had turned their passions into thriving businesses, and I felt inspired. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do yet, but I knew I wanted to create something that didn't involve reporting to anyone or being confined to a cubicle. I decided to learn how to build websites and start my own freelance web design business. It seemed like a good fit for my skill set. I had a basic understanding of HTML and CSS from a few online courses I'd taken years ago, and I had a natural inclination for design. I figured I could work on small projects in my free time and gradually build up a client base. So, I started small. I set up a basic website for myself and advertised my services on social media. The first few months were tough. I didn't get much traction, and the few inquiries I did receive often didn't result in paying work. I learned quickly that simply having a website wasn't enough. I needed to market myself better, network more, and refine my craft. I spent a lot of time taking free courses online, watching YouTube tutorials, and learning everything I could about web design, SEO, and digital marketing. I kept working my day job, but my evenings were dedicated to improving my skills and trying to land clients. Slowly, things began to pick up. I started getting small gigs here and there, building simple websites for local businesses, bloggers, and even a few personal projects. The first real turning point came when I built a website for a small bakery in my town. It wasn't a huge project, but it was my first real client, and it came with a recommendation to a friend who owned a local restaurant. That project, along with a few others, gave me the confidence to take the leap. In 2018, after 2 years of working both my day job and building my freelance business on the side, I finally made the decision to quit my job. It wasn't easy. I had saved up a little money, but I was still nervous about whether I could make enough to survive. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew I had to take the risk. I figured that even if it didn't work out, I could always go back to a regular job. I started dedicating all my time to my freelance business. I also expanded my services beyond just web design. I started offering social media management, email marketing, and branding services. As a result, my client base began to grow steadily. But just as things were looking up, disaster struck. In 2019, the first real challenge of my entrepreneurial journey came in the form of a major contract dispute. A client I had worked with for months refused to pay me for a project I had completed, citing unforeseen issues that weren't in the contract. I tried to resolve the issue amicably, but the client was uncooperative. After exhausting all other options, I had to hire a lawyer, and after months of back and forth, I was finally paid in full, but the whole ordeal left me feeling drained and frustrated. I was at a crossroads. I could let this one bad experience derail everything I had worked for, or I could learn from it and keep moving forward. I decided to do the latter. I went back to basics, reviewing all my contracts and tightening my terms with future clients. I also invested more time in legal education, learning how to protect myself and my business from similar situations. By the end of 2019, My business was doing better than ever. I had built a solid client base, my income was steadily growing, and I felt more confident in my ability to handle challenges. However, as much as I loved working for myself, I realized I was reaching a limit. I had hit a ceiling where I was working all the time, and while the work was fulfilling, I needed to think bigger. That's when I decided to scale up. In 2020, I brought on my first employee, a talented developer who I had worked with on a few projects. This was a game changer. Having an extra set of hands allowed me to take on bigger projects, and it freed up my time to focus on business development. As a team, we began to build not just websites, but full-scale digital marketing campaigns for clients. The business took off. We started working with mid-sized companies, startups, and even a few national brands. The projects were more complex, and the stakes were higher. My days went from being filled with client calls to managing a team, strategizing marketing campaigns, and refining our processes. It was a lot of work, but I was finally building the business I had always dreamed of. The next couple of years were a whirlwind. I hired a few more employees, expanded our services, and increased our revenue each year. We even launched a SaaS product to help small businesses with their online marketing efforts, and that took off in ways I couldn't have predicted. But with all the success came more challenges. Managing a growing business is no easy task. There were moments when I questioned if I could keep up with the pace, but I always reminded myself why I started: freedom, creativity, and the opportunity to build something meaningful. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything I've accomplished, I feel proud. My business is thriving, and I've learned so much along the way. I've faced failures, learned hard lessons, and made countless mistakes, but each one taught me something valuable. If there's one thing I've learned in this journey, it's that perseverance is everything. You don't have to be the smartest or the most talented person in the room. You just have to be willing to keep going, even when things get tough. I'm not rich, and I don't have a massive empire, but I've built something that supports me, my team, and our clients. And most importantly, I've created a life where I get to do what I love every day. I guess that's what being an entrepreneur is all about, creating your own path, even if it's a bumpy one. If you're thinking about starting your own business, just know this: it won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But if you stick with it and learn from every mistake, you'll get there. Maybe not in the way you expect, but you'll get there. And when you do, it'll be worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I was the shy kid who had trouble making friends, the one who would sit at the back of the classroom, sketching random ideas in notebooks rather than paying attention. My parents were always supportive, but never pushed me toward anything in particular. They were content as long as I did well in school and stayed out of trouble. But as the years went on, I began to realize that I didn't want to be just another person in the crowd. I wanted to build something of my own, something that would make a difference. It all started in college, though I didn't realize it at the time. I was studying computer science at a state university, and while I did enjoy the subject, I didn't have the passion for it that my classmates did. They could talk for hours about algorithms and the latest coding languages, while I felt lost in the shuffle. One evening, after a particularly long and frustrating group project, I found myself sitting alone in a coffee shop, scrolling through my phone aimlessly. That's when I saw an ad for a new app. It was a simple concept, an app that helped people track their personal goals. I downloaded the app out of curiosity, and as soon as I started using it, I realized something. The app had potential, but it wasn't user-friendly. The design was clunky, the notifications were annoying, and the overall experience was frustrating. But I could see the value in it. I thought, I could do this better. For the first time, I felt that spark of excitement, the same feeling I had when I first started coding years ago. But this was different. This wasn't just a class assignment. It was something real. I spent the next few weeks studying the app and brainstorming how I could improve it. I had no idea how to build a business, let alone market an app, but I was determined to try. I spent countless hours on Google, reading articles about entrepreneurship, design principles, and how to raise capital. I learned everything I could about the app market, consumer behavior, and what it took to succeed in a competitive environment. After months of tinkering and refining my concept, I finally had a working prototype. I called it Goal Setter. It wasn't perfect, but it was a huge step forward from the app one had originally seen. I reached out to a few friends who were more experienced in business and tech, asking for feedback and advice. They were kind enough to offer guidance, but the reality was clear. Building something from the ground up was hard. I didn't have the funding, the network, or the experience. But I wasn't ready to give up. I didn't have a job lined up after graduation, so I decided to take the plunge and work on Goalsetter full-time. I had saved up a small amount of money from odd jobs throughout college, so I figured I had a few months to get something off the ground before I needed to find a more traditional job. I started by pitching Goalsetter to a few potential investors. I reached out to local angel investors and venture capitalists, but the rejections kept coming. Some didn't even respond to my emails, while others politely told me that the app wasn't unique enough or that I didn't have enough experience to lead a project like this. Each rejection felt like a punch to the gut, but I refused to give up. After a few months of striking out with investors, I turned to crowdfunding. I launched a campaign on Kickstarter, hoping to raise enough money to bring my vision to life. I crafted a compelling story, created a sleek video, and offered early access to Goalsetter in exchange for pledges. The first few days were slow, but then something incredible happened. The project started gaining traction. I shared the campaign with my friends and family, and they helped spread the word. Slowly but surely, I started seeing donations come in. People believed in my idea. By the end of the campaign, I had raised more than $50,000, way more than I ever expected. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to hire a small team and get started on the next phase of development. I brought in a designer to help refine the app's interface, a marketing expert to help create a launch strategy, and a few developers to help with the technical side of things. For the first time, I felt like I was building something real. The next few months were a whirlwind. We worked around the clock, constantly tweaking the app, adding new features, and fixing bugs. We released a beta version of Goalsetter to a small group of users, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People loved the simplicity of the app, and they were genuinely excited about using it to track their goals. We incorporated as many suggestions as possible, and soon, we were ready for a full-scale launch. The day we launched, I was a bundle of nerves. I had poured everything into this project, my time, my money, and my energy, and now it was finally out in the world. I spent the entire day refreshing our App Store page, watching as the number of downloads ticked up slowly but steadily. It wasn't a massive viral success overnight, but it was growing. That felt like a victory in itself. Over the next few months, Goalsetter started gaining more and more users. We started getting press coverage, and the app was featured in a few prominent tech blogs. The buzz was enough to get the attention of investors, and soon, we had a series of meetings lined up with potential partners. One of those meetings turned into a partnership with a larger company in the productivity space. They saw the potential in Goalsetter and offered to invest in exchange for a strategic partnership. That partnership was a game changer. It provided the funding we needed to expand our team and accelerate development. We added new features, improved the user experience, and began offering premium subscriptions to monetize the app. The growth was slow at first, but over time, we started seeing consistent revenue, which was a huge relief. Now, years later, Goalsetter is one of the top-rated goal tracking apps in the market. We have millions of active users, a solid team, and a growing list of partnerships. Looking back, I still can't believe how far we've come. I went from being a shy kid who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life to running a successful business. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it's been the most rewarding journey I could have ever imagined. The key to my success? Persistence. Every time I was told no, I found a way to keep moving forward. When things got tough, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. I didn't give up on my dream, even when it felt impossible. I took risks, made mistakes, and learned from them. And now, I'm proud to say that I've built something that helps people all over the world achieve their goals. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't give up. The road will be rough, and there will be days when you question everything, but keep pushing forward. It might take longer than you expect, but with enough determination, you can make your dreams a reality. I was just a regular guy working a 9-to-5 office job. I hated every single minute of it. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the humdrum of endless emails and meetings, and the feeling of being just another cog in a machine. The worst part? I felt stuck. My salary was decent enough, but I had no real sense of purpose, no excitement about the future. I started out working in marketing for a mid-sized company, trying to climb the corporate ladder like everyone else. I'd been there for 5 years, watching people get promoted, move up, or get laid off. But something about the whole thing never sat right with me. I wanted more. I wasn't content with the idea of working in the same place for the next 30 years, wearing the same suit, and doing the same tasks day in and day out. So, I began dreaming. At first, I wasn't sure what I wanted. I thought about starting a small business, maybe a cafe or a retail shop. But I soon realized that those ideas weren't for me. I didn't have the passion for coffee or fashion, and the thought of dealing with employees, inventory, and customer complaints felt more like a nightmare than a dream. Then, one evening while scrolling through my phone, I saw an ad for an online business. It was a course for people interested in dropshipping. I had no idea what dropshipping was, but I was intrigued. The concept was simple enough. Set up an online store. Find suppliers who would ship products directly to your customers, and you wouldn't have to deal with inventory or handling products. It sounded almost too good to be true, but I decided to look into it further. I spent the next couple of weeks researching dropshipping, reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and joining online forums. I learned that it was a real business model, but there was a catch. It wasn't as easy as the ads made it sound. Success wasn't guaranteed. Many people who tried dropshipping failed because they didn't understand marketing, didn't choose the right products, or didn't know how to drive traffic to their stores. I wasn't intimidated, though. In fact, the challenge excited me. One weekend, I finally pulled the trigger. I enrolled in an online course that promised to teach me everything I needed to know about starting a dropshipping business. The course was long and overwhelming at first. There were a million things to learn: how to choose a niche, how to find suppliers, how to set up an online store, and, most importantly, how to drive traffic and convert visitors into buyers. I spent hours every day after work watching tutorials and building my store. My mind was constantly buzzing with ideas. My first store was a disaster. I picked a niche that seemed promising: gadgets and tech accessories, but I didn't really know anything about the products or the target market. I spent money on ads, but I barely got any sales. I remember feeling completely defeated. I'd spend hours setting everything up, and now it seemed like all my efforts were for nothing. But instead of giving up, I decided to reevaluate everything. I went back to the drawing board. I researched successful dropshipping stores and studied what made them work. I learned that successful businesses didn't just sell random products. They sold things people actually wanted, products that solved a problem or appealed to a specific audience. That's when I realized that I hadn't been thinking about the customer. I was too focused on finding products that I thought were cool, not products that people would actually want to buy. So, I made a bold decision. I would switch to a completely different niche. I picked a market that I knew well: fitness. I had been into fitness for years, and I knew that people were constantly looking for new workout gear, supplements, and tools to help them get fit. I rebranded my store, found new suppliers, and launched with a fresh marketing strategy. This time, things started to click. Slowly but surely, the sales started coming in. I was ecstatic. It wasn't huge at first, just a few orders a day, but it was enough to keep me motivated. I invested every penny I made back into the business: more ads, better products, improved website design. I was hustling like crazy, working on my business every free moment I had. Months went by, and my store continued to grow. I started hiring virtual assistants to help with customer service and order fulfillment. I also brought on a part-time marketer to help me with social media and influencer outreach. The more I focused on scaling, the more I saw the potential. I wasn't just earning a side income anymore. I was building something real. Fast forward to a year later, and my business had exploded. I was making 5 figures a month in revenue. I had quit my 9-to-5 job and was working full-time on my online store. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to quit. But the feeling of being in control of my future, the ability to work from anywhere, and the financial freedom I had gained made it all worth it. I've learned so much along the way about business, marketing, and most importantly, myself. The journey wasn't just about making money. It was about proving to myself that I could do something I was passionate about, that I could take a risk and make it work. I've had my fair share of failures, and I still face challenges every day. But I've come a long way from the guy who sat in that dull office, dreaming about something more. Today, I run a successful e-commerce brand. I've expanded into other niches and even launched my own line of fitness products. I'm not a millionaire, but I've achieved financial independence in the kind of lifestyle I used to dream about. I'm still learning, still growing, and still pushing myself to new heights. So, to anyone out there who feels stuck or is thinking about starting their own business, don't be afraid to take that first step. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, it's absolutely possible to build something amazing. You have to believe in yourself, even when it feels like you're not getting anywhere. Trust me, the hard work will eventually pay off. It all started with a failing dream. I had always been fascinated by the idea of starting my own business. Growing up, I was that kid who would sell candy bars to classmates, set up lemonade stands, and even organized mini yard sales just to make a buck. It wasn't about the money. It was the thrill of the hustle, the rush of making something from nothing. So, when I finally graduated college, I felt ready to take on the world. But reality hit hard, and my first venture ended in disaster. I launched a digital marketing agency straight out of college, armed with nothing more than a marketing degree, a laptop, and a lot of hope. I was confident that I could crack the code on attracting clients and growing a successful business. The market, however, had other plans. I struggled to secure clients. The few leads I got fell through faster than I could follow up, and I quickly burned through all my savings just trying to stay afloat. After about a year, I realized I had failed. I packed up my office, and for a while, I was embarrassed to even tell people what had happened. It was a crushing defeat, and I couldn't figure out what went wrong. The truth was, I didn't understand the power of persistence back then. I thought I could just learn some strategies and shortcuts to success, but I was wrong. The thing about entrepreneurship is that it's not just about having a great idea or the right tools. It's about learning how to survive the setbacks, how to pivot when things aren't working, and most importantly, how to keep pushing forward when all you want to do is quit. I spent a year working regular jobs to support myself, but deep down, I knew I couldn't shake the entrepreneurial itch. I realized that I needed to come up with a new approach. I couldn't just jump into the deep end and expect to swim. I had to learn how to swim first. So, I decided to step back and reassess everything. I started studying successful entrepreneurs in detail, watching interviews, reading books, and listening to podcasts. I analyzed what made them successful. I noticed that the entrepreneurs who truly thrived weren't the ones who succeeded right away. They were the ones who faced failure, learned from it, and kept moving forward. That's when the idea for my next venture began to take shape. I wanted to create a platform that would help small businesses, just like mine, grow in a competitive world. However, I didn't want to offer generic advice. I wanted to offer real, actionable steps that would have an immediate impact on their bottom line. After a lot of research, brainstorming, and strategizing, I launched an online course designed to help small business owners navigate the complexities of digital marketing. I wasn't trying to build a massive empire, at least not at first. I just wanted to help people, and in doing so, I hoped to rebuild my own entrepreneurial confidence. But the course wasn't an instant hit. It didn't go viral overnight, and I didn't make six figures in the first month. The early days were difficult. I spent hours creating content, fine-tuning marketing strategies, and tweaking the website. And still, no one was signing up. I wanted to give up again. But this time, I decided I would push through. I started getting creative with my marketing. I reached out to influencers in the small business space and offered them a free trial of my course in exchange for reviews. I spent long nights networking on social media, answering questions, and providing value wherever I could. Slowly but surely, my efforts began to pay off. After a few months, I had my first paying customers. They left glowing reviews, which led to more people signing up. The word-of-mouth referrals started rolling in, and before I knew it, my course was gaining momentum. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I took all the profits from the course and reinvested them into creating additional content, expanding the offerings, and refining the website. I hired a small team to help with customer support and marketing. Every penny I made went right back into building the business. Slowly, but surely, the brand started growing. The course expanded to include coaching sessions, webinars, and a community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Over the next 2 years, my business began to hit its stride. I became known as an expert in helping small businesses grow, and more people started seeking my guidance. I had to scale quickly to keep up with the demand. I hired more people, created additional products, and even launched a podcast where I interviewed successful entrepreneurs from around the world. The real turning point came when I decided to launch a premium mastermind program. I knew that to scale the business and increase revenue, I would need to offer something at a higher price point. I wasn't sure how people would respond to it, but the result blew me away. I had a group of 20 high-level entrepreneurs sign up for my program, paying a substantial fee for access to my exclusive coaching. That mastermind program catapulted my business to the next level. I made more in 1 month than I used to make in an entire year. It was a breakthrough moment, but it didn't come without its own set of challenges. I learned quickly that when your business starts growing, so do the problems. Scaling brings new obstacles, from managing a larger team to keeping up with customer demand and maintaining the quality of your offerings. But I had learned a critical lesson by then. Persistence pays off. Every setback was just a lesson in disguise, and I had come to understand that no matter how many times you fail or how long it takes to figure things out, success is built on resilience and consistency. As my business grew, I began to think about the bigger picture. I had built something that not only provided for my own livelihood, but also helped thousands of small businesses across the globe thrive. I had come full circle. From that failed marketing agency to a growing online education platform, I was finally living the dream I had once thought was impossible. Today, my business is thriving. I've spoken at conferences, published books, and expanded into new markets. I've helped thousands of entrepreneurs build sustainable businesses, and I've created a lasting impact in the digital marketing world. But I'll never forget the feeling of failure. I'll never forget those early days when I was sitting in my empty office, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And I'll never forget the lesson that success isn't a straight line. It's a winding path filled with obstacles. But if you keep going, keep learning, and keep adapting, you'll eventually get there. To anyone reading this, if you're in the middle of your own entrepreneurial journey and things seem impossible, I want you to know this. Failure is not the end. It's simply part of the process. Keep going. Keep pushing forward. Your breakthrough might just be around the corner. I'll be honest, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. In fact, if anything, I was surrounded by the smell of grease and sawdust most of my childhood. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone, but that didn't always mean people helped each other. The first time I learned about entrepreneurship wasn't from a book or a seminar. It was from watching my dad fix cars in our garage late into the night. The way my dad approached his work was methodical and full of passion. He wasn't just fixing cars, he was problem-solving, making something better than it was before. That got me thinking, what if I could do the same thing, but with something bigger? I didn't know exactly what bigger meant, but I had a feeling it would involve taking risks and failing a lot. And if there's one thing I had learned by that point, it was that failure wasn't something to fear, it was something to learn from. I didn't have a clue about starting a business back then. I was in high school, obsessed with cars and gadgets. My idea of entrepreneurship at the time was fixing broken stuff around the neighborhood and making a few bucks. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy the things I wanted, like the latest tech or the rare car parts one could never find. That was my first taste of what it felt like to build something from the ground up, even if it was just a repair job. After high school, I decided to pursue a degree in business. I figured that if I was going to go all in, I might as well learn the rules of the game. College was a blur of lectures, group projects, and, let's be honest, procrastination. But it also opened my eyes to something unexpected: marketing. I had always been good with people, and I realized that selling wasn't just about convincing someone to buy something. It was about telling a story that resonated with them. By the time I graduated, I had this burning idea in the back of my head. What if I could create a company that helped other small businesses market themselves better? I didn't know the first thing about running a marketing agency, but I knew I could learn. What I didn't know was how much I would need to learn, and how much I would fail before I figured it out. I'll spare you the details of the first year, but let's just say it was rough. I had some clients, but they were small, and the work was sporadic. I was juggling everything: marketing, sales, client management, and working out of my tiny apartment. If I wasn't at my desk, I was hustling on the phone or attending networking events, trying to make connections. It was exhausting, and there were days when I seriously questioned my decision to even try. One day, I got a call from a potential client. They were a small e-commerce brand that sold handmade home goods, but their sales had plateaued. They had a solid product, but were struggling to break through the noise in the market. I took the call, spent about an hour listening to their challenges, and made them an offer. I was going to help them rebrand, build a new website, and launch a targeted social media campaign. The only catch: They had a tiny budget, and I would need to work for a fraction of what I usually charged. I took it, not because I was being generous, but because I knew that this could be the case study I needed to take my business to the next level. I didn't sleep much over the next few weeks. I researched competitors, mapped out a marketing strategy, and got to work. It wasn't perfect, but we made some significant improvements. Traffic to their site started picking up, and sales began to follow. Within 6 months, their brand had grown by 200%. They were able to reinvest that into better products, and it all snowballed from there. That was the turning point for my business. I finally had a success story to share, and it helped me land bigger clients. But it also taught me a valuable lesson. The value of a case study was priceless. It wasn't about the money I made from that initial project. It was about proving that I could deliver results. From there, I used that story to sell my services to bigger businesses, and slowly but surely, my company started to gain traction. By the 3rd year, things were looking a lot better. We had a team of 5 people, an office space, not just a desk in my apartment, and a growing list of clients. We worked with e-commerce brands, tech startups, and even some local businesses looking to expand online. But while business was booming, I was starting to feel the pressure. I had gone from being a solo entrepreneur to managing a team, dealing with payroll, and handling a million things at once. It was a lot, and I wasn't always sure I was cut out for it. One of the toughest moments came when I lost a big client. It was a brand that we had worked with for over a year, and they had just decided to go in a different direction. It felt like a gut punch, especially since I had poured so much into their success. But rather than throwing in the towel, I decided to turn this setback into an opportunity. We used that extra time to double down on our marketing strategy and start reaching out to even bigger companies. That was when we signed our first multi-million-dollar client. From there, things really took off. We were no longer a small-time operation. We were a legit agency that worked with top-tier brands. But with that success came even more challenges. The larger the company became, the more I had to step up my leadership game. I had to learn how to manage people, how to scale effectively, and how to keep the business culture intact as we grew. It wasn't easy. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. From working out of my bedroom to running a company with dozens of employees and clients all over the world, the journey has been nothing short of insane. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've learned so much, not just about business, but about perseverance, failure, and the power of storytelling. If there's one thing I can say to anyone reading this, it's this: don't be afraid to start small. The hardest part is taking that first step, but once you do, everything changes. Today, I look back on my humble beginnings and realize that those years of struggle and uncertainty were the building blocks of my success. I wouldn't have gotten here without them. And as much as I'd love to tell you that the journey was smooth from the moment I had that first aha moment, it wasn't. But now, I'm proud to say I'm exactly where I was meant to be, doing what I love and helping other businesses do the same. If I could go back and give my younger self one piece of advice, it would be this: trust the process, embrace the failures, and never stop learning. Every day is a new chance to grow, and if you keep pushing forward, you'll get there. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. It was a Tuesday morning when I first thought I had completely messed up. I had been working for months on my side project, a small online store selling eco-friendly products. My job at the time was a standard 9 to 5 desk job, working as a marketing assistant for a tech company. I had no background in e-commerce, but after a long string of sleepless nights and watching countless YouTube videos, I thought I could give it a shot. I started with the basics, setting up an online store through Shopify, picking a simple, niche product that I was passionate about, reusable water bottles, and investing all the savings I had been slowly stacking up for the last year. I had spent weeks sourcing my products from suppliers and perfecting my branding. I made sure my website looked professional, hired a freelancer to design the logo, and even spent extra on paid ads to drive some initial traffic. The dream was simple: sell eco-friendly products to environmentally conscious individuals while making a decent income on the side. At first, things seemed to be going okay. My website went live, and I got a few orders here and there, nothing spectacular, but enough to fuel my hope. The trickle of sales felt like the tiniest victory every time. However, as I looked at my bank account, the numbers didn't add up. I had spent more on advertising than I was making in sales. The worst part was that I had also just dropped a huge chunk of money into a batch of inventory I hadn't even sold yet. I was staring down a stack of boxes in my garage, each containing hundreds of water bottles, and I had no idea what to do with them. The panic set in. I remember staring at my laptop, scrolling through my Shopify dashboard, and realizing I had made a fundamental mistake. I hadn't done enough market research. I hadn't really understood my audience. I had simply assumed that because I was passionate about sustainability, others would be too. But there I was, facing the harsh reality of being stuck with inventory and barely any customers. To make matters worse, the ad campaigns I had set up were bleeding money. My Google and Facebook ads weren't converting into sales, and I was reaching the wrong audience. I had misjudged everything: pricing, marketing strategies, and the way I communicated my brand. My eco-friendly message wasn't as powerful as I thought. In fact, it was too generic. Everyone was doing the same thing. It was around this time that I seriously started questioning if I should quit. I had sunk my savings into this business, and now I was thinking it might all go down the drain. I felt like I had nothing to show for it. My friends kept asking how the store was going, and I couldn't even bring myself to give them a straightforward answer without feeling like a failure. Every time someone asked, it was like a reminder that I had jumped into something I didn't fully understand. I thought to myself, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But then something happened. Instead of shutting the business down, I decided to dig deeper. I took a step back, analyzed my mistakes, and started to get creative. I realized that what I was missing was community. I had been focused so much on selling the product that I had neglected to build relationships with the people who would actually buy it. That's when I decided to change my approach. First, I reached out to my existing customers and asked them for feedback. It wasn't an easy thing to do. Admitting my failures was humbling, but I needed to know what wasn't working. I offered them a discount on their next purchase in exchange for a few honest thoughts about the brand and the products. To my surprise, many of them responded, and their feedback was invaluable. They didn't care as much about the eco-friendly message. I had been treating it as a trend. What they really cared about was whether the products were high quality and durable. I had thought being eco-friendly was enough to justify a higher price point, but they wanted more. They wanted function. They wanted value. I had to reframe my messaging completely. I pivoted to focus on the durability and practicality of the products instead of just the green aspect. I revamped my website, simplifying the messaging and adding customer testimonials that emphasized product quality. But the most significant change came when I started engaging with my audience more directly. I created social media posts that didn't just show my products but told a story about sustainability, design, and real-life use cases. I also realized that I had been ignoring an essential part of e-commerce: email marketing. I had collected email addresses from every sale I made, but I hadn't utilized that list. I started sending out monthly newsletters that weren't just about promotions. They were full of useful tips on sustainability, DIY projects, and content that resonated with my audience. I included stories about the people who used my products, and the response was incredible. People loved it. As the months passed, my store began to slowly turn around. Sales picked up as word spread. I even started to get more organic traffic to my website from search engines, which was a game changer. I realized that advertising wasn't the only path to success. Building an audience and trust was far more important. But the biggest turning point came when I discovered a more profitable avenue: collaborating with other eco-friendly brands. At first, I was hesitant to partner with competitors, but when I reached out to a few, I was surprised by how many were open to cross-promotion. I partnered with a small organic soap company to create bundled offers and shared each other's social media platforms. This led to a surge in sales and helped me build valuable connections within the eco-friendly community. Fast forward a year, and my business was no longer a side hustle. It had become my full-time job. The revenue wasn't just covering my bills, it was starting to exceed the salary I had been making at my marketing job. I could finally quit my 9-to-5 and dedicate all my energy to growing my brand. I expanded my product line, offering new eco-friendly products, and even started working with influencers who genuinely believed in the mission. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I never would have guessed that a failure would turn into the best decision of my life. I've learned more in the last year than I did in all the years I spent in a corporate job, and most importantly, I've learned the power of persistence and adaptation. Today, my store is thriving. I've built a community of loyal customers. I've expanded into international markets, and I'm in the process of launching my own sustainability-focused blog to share everything I've learned. So, if you're reading this and feeling like you're not getting the results you want right away, don't give up. Success doesn't come without challenges, and sometimes those challenges are the very things that make you stronger. Trust the process, learn from your mistakes, and never stop evolving. Because one day, you might just look back and realize that the hard times were the moments that pushed you toward success. I always thought I had a normal job. You know, the kind that you work hard at, pay your bills, and then wait for the weekend. I was content. Well, mostly. The problem was, the contentment started feeling like a trap, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting time. It wasn't a midlife crisis or anything that drastic, but it was a quiet dissatisfaction that crept in more and more every day. I was 28, working as a project manager for a small tech startup. The company was young, innovative, and growing fast, and I had a front-row seat to the excitement. I wasn't the founder or the visionary. I was the person who helped keep things running smoothly, connecting dots between teams, managing deadlines, and delivering results. It was fine, honestly. There was nothing wrong with my work. But there was a gnawing feeling in the back of my mind that maybe this wasn't it. Maybe I could do more. Maybe I could build something myself. It was after a 16-hour workday, answering emails and fixing last-minute bugs for a product launch, that I had my breakthrough moment. I was sitting at my desk, completely burned out, when I stumbled across an article online about a guy who started a clothing brand with just a small investment and a handful of ideas. He didn't have a degree in fashion, no special training. He just had the drive to do it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. If he could do it, why couldn't I? But the idea of jumping straight into entrepreneurship without any experience was terrifying. I'd always dreamed of starting my own business, but the fear of failure held me back. I didn't have a killer idea. I wasn't passionate about some niche that could make me millions overnight. I just knew I wanted to build something from scratch. That was the spark, and I couldn't ignore it. The next morning, I couldn't get the thought out of my head. I spent the entire day brainstorming, writing down business ideas, researching different industries, trying to find something that could spark my interest. I wanted it to be meaningful, something I would actually care about. Eventually, I realized that the thing I cared about most was helping people like me, people who felt stuck in their 9 to 5 jobs, people who wanted to escape the grind but didn't know where to start. I thought about it more, and it dawned on me that there was a huge gap in the market for a platform that helped people transition from traditional jobs to running their own businesses. There were tons of online courses, mentors, and advice, but they all seemed so disconnected. What if there was one place that combined everything? From practical steps on how to start a business, to coaching, to a community of people all going through the same thing? That was the seed for what would become my first business. Of course, it wasn't that easy. I had no idea where to start. I couldn't just quit my job. I had bills to pay, responsibilities, and at the time, my idea was nothing but a vague dream. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to at least try. I didn't want to wake up when I was 40 and wonder what if. So, I made a plan. A serious one. I started putting aside a portion of my salary every month to fund my idea, and I used every bit of my free time after work to learn the basics of starting a business. I took online courses about entrepreneurship, marketing, and business operations. I read books. I networked. I did everything I could to arm myself with knowledge. 6 months later, I finally had a workable idea and enough confidence to take the leap. I quit my job and decided to go full-time into my new venture. I rented a small office space, hired a freelance web developer, and set up a website. I called it Hustle Hub. It was a community-driven platform where aspiring entrepreneurs could learn everything from how to register a business to how to scale it. I designed a course that walked people through the step-by-step process of leaving their jobs and becoming successful entrepreneurs. There was nothing like it in the market at the time. The first month was terrifying. I had 0 customers, 0 traffic, and I was burning through my savings faster than I had anticipated. There were days when I thought I made a huge mistake, that I should just go back to the safe job with a paycheck every 2 weeks. But every time I felt that panic, I reminded myself that I was building something from scratch, and if I didn't give it everything I had, I'd never know if it could succeed. After the first few months, things started to pick up. Word of mouth spread, and more people started visiting the site. I worked nonstop on refining the courses, adding new content, and engaging with the community. I was doing everything: the marketing, the customer service, the accounting. The business grew slowly but steadily, and after a year, I was able to hire a few full-time employees to help with the workload. What really pushed us over the edge was when we launched a live coaching program. We partnered with a few established entrepreneurs who had experience in scaling businesses and offered one-on-one coaching to people who were serious about starting their own companies. The response was overwhelming. People were eager for personalized guidance, and our platform became a trusted resource for new entrepreneurs. By the end of year 2, Hustle Hub was making more money than I had ever dreamed. I had the freedom I longed for, and more importantly, I was doing something I was passionate about. I had helped hundreds of people start their own businesses, quit their jobs, and take control of their lives. The testimonials I received from people whose lives had been changed were worth more than any paycheck I could have earned. I remember one message in particular. It was from a woman who had been working as a waitress for over 10 years. She said that after going through our program, she had launched her own online store and was making more money than she ever thought possible. She thanked me for creating Hustle Hub, because without it, she never would have had the confidence to take the leap. That message hit me like a ton of bricks. It made everything worth it. Now, 3 years after I started Hustle Hub, the company is thriving. We have a team of 20 employees, and our platform has helped thousands of people turn their dreams of entrepreneurship into reality. I've learned more in the past 3 years than I ever did in my previous 28 years of life, and I'm still learning every day. There are days when I think about how close I came to staying in that safe job, and I'm grateful every time I realize I didn't. My journey wasn't easy. There were many sleepless nights, moments of self-doubt, and times when I questioned whether it would all work out. But in the end, it did. And I've learned that if you have a passion, a willingness to work hard, and the courage to take the leap, anything is possible. Now, I wake up every day excited to work. I get to help others build the life they want, and I've built a life I never thought possible. The hardest part was just taking that first step, and I'll never regret it. I've always believed that success is a mix of timing, determination, and, sometimes, luck. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, luck is often something you make yourself. This is the story of how I went from being broke, with a mountain of student debt and a failing business, to building a 7-figure company that now operates in 3 countries. It all started back in 2015 when I was still in college. I had the typical dream of becoming an entrepreneur. You know, the one where you envision your startup thriving, making millions, and becoming the next big name in Silicon Valley. My first venture wasn't anything groundbreaking. I launched a small mobile app with a couple of friends. It was meant to be a social platform, but we didn't have a unique angle or market research to back it up. Long story short, the app failed miserably. I couldn't even pay the bills for server hosting, and we had to pull the plug after just 6 months. At that time, I didn't know what to do next. I'd maxed out my credit cards, taken on student loans, and had no idea how I was going to pay them back. It felt like every time I tried something, it failed. But instead of giving up, I took a step back and decided to reassess. In the midst of all this, I landed a job as a junior marketing assistant at a small digital marketing agency. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but it gave me a sense of stability and a bit of cash flow. It was during my time there that I realized something. I was learning about marketing on a whole new level: Facebook ads, Google ads, SEO strategies, the works. This was something I had never fully understood before, but now I had the chance to apply it in real time. I took what I learned at my day job and started experimenting with it on the side. I began working with small businesses, offering digital marketing services to help them grow. It wasn't glamorous work, and I was barely making enough to pay my rent, but it was enough to keep me afloat and give me a new sense of purpose. In 2017, I had an aha moment. I noticed a gap in the market. Small businesses were struggling with online marketing, but they couldn't afford high-end agencies or large marketing teams. That's when I had the idea to create a platform that would provide affordable marketing services, including automated ad creation, social media management, and email campaigns, specifically designed for small business owners. I didn't have much in terms of capital, but I knew I had the skill set and the drive. I quit my job, drained whatever was left in my savings, and hired a small team of developers. We worked out of a dingy co-working space that had more noise than a concert hall, but we kept pushing. I had no investors, no clear path to profitability, and no guarantees that this would work. But I was determined. The first few months were a struggle. We had trouble getting customers, and the platform had bugs that we couldn't seem to fix fast enough. I remember one night, I was sitting in the office with my team, completely frustrated. We hadn't made a single sale in weeks, and I was almost out of money. That night, I sat down and made a decision. I wasn't going to let this business fail like my previous one. I needed to rethink our entire marketing strategy. The breakthrough came when I started creating content around the challenges small business owners faced with marketing. I began writing blog posts, creating video tutorials, and even hosting free webinars. I focused on providing value to my audience, not just selling them my product. Slowly but surely, we started getting leads. People were signing up for our webinars, engaging with our content, and eventually paying for our services. The first big win came when we landed a contract with a local boutique, and that gave us the credibility we desperately needed. We took that momentum and ran with it. Over the next year, we refined our platform, hired more developers, and invested in customer support. We were finally on the map. By the end of 2018, we had made our first six-figure revenue month. It was surreal. I remember looking at the bank account and feeling like I was in a dream. My team and I celebrated with a small dinner, and I couldn't help but think about how far we had come from those dark days of struggling to pay the rent. But, as any entrepreneur knows, success isn't a straight line. The journey is filled with ups and downs. In 2019, we faced a major setback. A competitor who had much more capital and resources entered the market, and we started losing customers to them. It was devastating. We had worked so hard to get to where we were, and now it felt like we were at risk of losing everything. This time, I refused to give up. I took a deep breath and pivoted. Instead of competing directly with the bigger players, I looked at our unique strengths, affordability, personalization, and the deep understanding of our customers' needs. We focused on building stronger relationships with our clients, offering customized solutions, and improving our customer service. It paid off. In 2020, we began to see steady growth again. What really changed for us, though, was the way we approached marketing. We embraced influencer partnerships, focusing on micro-influencers who had strong, engaged communities in our target market. We began offering affiliate marketing programs and referral bonuses. The word-of-mouth promotion was invaluable. By 2021, we expanded to 2 more countries, and our revenue hit 7 figures. What started as a small marketing platform for small businesses had evolved into a full-scale digital marketing agency that catered to businesses of all sizes. Now, here we are in 2025, with a team of over 100 people across 3 continents. We've helped thousands of businesses scale their operations, and our platform is used by companies ranging from local startups to multinational corporations. But it wasn't always easy. There were countless sleepless nights, moments where I thought I was done, and periods of uncertainty. I don't say this to brag. I share this because I want others to know that it's possible. No matter how many times you fail, no matter how many setbacks you face, there's always a way forward if you keep learning, pivoting, and pushing yourself. Entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and using it as a stepping stone to something bigger. I wouldn't be where I am today without the lessons I've learned along the way. The most important one, keep going, keep pushing, and when you're tired, keep going a little longer. That's when the real breakthroughs happen. I always thought I had it figured out, until life threw a curveball I wasn't ready for. My name's Nick, and I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Ever since I was a kid, I was the one selling lemonade at the corner stand or starting small businesses with my friends. But I never imagined that the real test of my character would come in the form of a single decision, one that could have easily ended my dreams. This is my story of how I built a business from scratch, almost lost it all, and somehow ended up in a place I never thought I'd be. It all began when I decided to leave my 9-to-5 job. I was working as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech company, making a decent salary and living a comfortable life. But comfort had always been the enemy for me. I wasn't happy. I felt like I was stuck in a loop of monotonous work, and my dreams of starting something on my own were slipping away. One day, after a particularly frustrating meeting with my boss, I made the decision. I quit. Now, you might think that sounds like a bold move. It was. But in reality, I had no backup plan. No savings to fall back on. My rent was due in 2 weeks, and I had a credit card maxed out from previous business ideas that failed. I was a mess, but I was determined. So, I started brainstorming. I knew I wanted to start an online business. Something scalable. Something that could work even while I slept. But I didn't have a product, a service, or a clear vision. What I did have was a deep understanding of marketing and a network of contacts from my old job. I knew how to market a product and drive traffic. What I needed was something to sell. After weeks of obsessively researching trends, I stumbled across a product that seemed promising: custom phone cases. The market was saturated, but I noticed something. There was a demand for highly personalized, unique phone cases that reflected individual style. Cases with custom designs, quotes, and artwork. It wasn't a completely original idea, but I thought I could put a new spin on it. I decided I'd go for it. I found a supplier overseas, set up a basic Shopify store, and spent the next 2 weeks obsessing over the details. I was working 16-hour days trying to make this work, and I felt the pressure mounting with every hour. I launched my store with 0 sales. 0. For days, nothing happened. I thought it was all over. I was ready to pack it in and return to the security of a 9-to-5 job, but then something happened. I received an email from a potential influencer who was interested in promoting my product. She had a following of 50,000 on Instagram and was willing to give me a shot for a relatively small fee. I was broke, but this could be my chance. I took out a loan from my credit card and paid her. The post went live, and I held my breath. The next few hours felt like a lifetime. Then, the sales started rolling in. Not a lot, but enough to get me excited. Over the next few weeks, I reinvested every penny into more influencer partnerships, social media ads, and improving the website. Slowly, the business began to grow. But then, disaster struck. My supplier ran into issues with their manufacturing plant. They couldn't keep up with demand, and my orders started piling up with delays. Customers were furious. Negative reviews flooded in. I started getting messages asking for refunds, and I was losing money faster than I could make it. My credit card was maxed out again, and I was on the verge of shutting down everything. But I refused to quit. I took a deep breath and spent hours researching alternative suppliers. I found one, but they were more expensive, and I had to adjust my pricing structure. I also overhauled my customer service, making sure to communicate transparently with everyone who was waiting on their orders. I gave refunds to those who demanded it, but also offered discounts on future purchases. The support from some of my loyal customers was overwhelming, and slowly, things started to turn around. But then came the next hurdle: competition. As my business began to gain traction, other sellers noticed. They started copying my designs, undercutting my prices, and flooding the market. It was infuriating. But instead of panicking, I adapted. I pivoted from being just a custom phone case company to offering unique, high-quality accessories like laptop skins, wireless charger pads, and even custom keychains. I doubled down on my branding and started focusing on the story behind my products, how they were all designed by independent artists, and how each sale contributed to a charity supporting creative initiatives. It wasn't an easy journey. There were nights when I thought about quitting, especially when the sales weren't coming in as fast as I had hoped. But I stuck with it. The key was persistence and the understanding that nothing great happens overnight. Fast forward to a year later, and my business was thriving. I had a small team of employees working with me, and the company had expanded to sell accessories in multiple niches. We were shipping worldwide and had a steady stream of repeat customers. I had paid off my debts, built up savings, and even started investing in other businesses. It wasn't just about the money, though. What really made it worth it was the freedom I gained. I could travel when I wanted, spend time with my family, and most importantly, work on something that I was truly passionate about. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. But I'm not the kind of person to rest on my laurels. I realized that in order to scale even further, I would need to build more sustainable systems and diversify my income streams. So, I began working on a subscription service where customers would receive personalized phone cases every few months. This idea was risky, but it paid off in the long run, creating a steady flow of recurring revenue. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were times when I wanted to give up, when the thought of going back to a safe, predictable job seemed so tempting. But every setback, every failure, and every moment of doubt only made me stronger. It wasn't just the product that made my business successful. It was the perseverance, the constant adaptation, and the refusal to quit. So, to anyone reading this who is considering taking the leap into entrepreneurship, it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. The journey is filled with twists and turns, but if you believe in what you're doing and stay committed, you'll come out the other side stronger than you ever thought possible. Keep pushing, keep learning, and never give up on your dreams. This journey has taught me that the path to success isn't linear. It's messy, chaotic, and filled with uncertainty. But it's also incredibly rewarding. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.